Welcome to a special edition of In the Labs with Todd. These growth charts are pretty neat. I know in Canada we had one, it was on the back of one of our doors though, where we could keep track of our kids' growth over the years, and it was fantastic. But there was a couple problems with that. One was, it was on a door frame, so we couldn't take it with us when we moved over here to the UK. And the other thing was that we needed to remember to actually record the height of our kids on it, and that didn't always happen at the same time every year. So this is my solution to that. It's a growth chart that you can bring out every Christmas and record your kids' heights on it. And what a great Christmas decoration, a great piece of history that you're going to cherish for many, many years to come. Anyway, let me show you how I made this. Just like any of my projects, I started out with a sketch. I first had to start out with the general idea, and then I took that general idea and started to break it down a little bit better. In this example, you can see how I took apart the actual snowman's head and decided how I was going to layer it up in the software. Let's have a look at the first of the two files that I'm going to include along with this project. So obviously when you open up this file, you're going to see that we have some important information here for you. And as always, please read and make sure you understand this. Make sure you adjust all of the tooling so it's safe and appropriate for your machine, okay? So we're just going to click OK and have a look at the file. So if we take a look at our actual job setup, it's a pretty basic job setup, nothing fancy here. It's a single-sided job. I'm using the material that I had on hand, which was 300 millimeters by 800 millimeters by 18 millimeters. I'm going to zero off my material surface. I'm going to use the bottom left as my datum position, and because it is just a bunch of 2D toolpaths, I just need standard modeling resolution, and I'm going to use my regular default that I always use when I'm doing stuff like this, and I'm just going to click OK. Now it's going to instantly tell me right off the bat that one of my toolpaths has been calculated that goes through my material, and that's alright. I already know that, so I'm not too worried about it. We're just going to click OK. Let's have a look at our layers here. We only have one layer. I wanted to make this super simple. Okay, so there we have it. So what we have here for our vectors, we have a profile vector. This is the cutout vector of our full snowman's head. We're going to pocket in some different recesses here for different elements that are below. We have the bauble or the pom-pom for the top of his hat that goes on top here. I've got the mouth and the two eyes that are actually going to fit into the mouth and eye pockets. We have the brim of his hat, which we're going to use the fluting toolpath to put some nice little recessed lines in there. And then we have the carrot for his nose, which is going to fit again into those pockets. This will all make sense in a second. Now, one of the things I wanted to plan for was my difficulty with finishing. So the way this is going to work is I can actually paint the toque or the top of his hat red, and I can kind of overspill that paint underneath the pom-pom or into the brim of the hat, and then I can paint the brim of the hat red and it'll just stick on top, so it'll cover up all my mistakes that I have. And the same with the eyes are going to be painted black, the carrot will be orange, and the mouth will be black as well, and they'll all fit into the pockets, so really I can't mess up this finishing very much. So let's have a look at the actual tooling for this. Let's pin this out and we'll tile our views. So we have the very basic 5 toolpaths here. We have the first one, which is going to be a pocket toolpath. So you can see here in the 2D view, we're going to pocket out the areas for the eyes, the nose or the carrot, and the mouth. We're going to go down 3 millimeters, which isn't all that deep. I just wanted to have a way to locate these in there so I knew where they were going to be. Using an end mill for that, I'm going to use an offset toolpath. No allowance. I've actually oversized all of these pockets by 1 millimeter, okay? I did that on purpose because 1 millimeter for this kind of material is perfectly fine. Nothing wrong there at all. So that's great. And we're just rename that toolpath and we can go ahead and calculate that and we'll preview our visible toolpath. And you'll see it's very basic. It's just some pockets in there, okay? The next thing we're going to look at is the eyes and the mouth and pocket. Now, I didn't do this in my finished one. I adjusted this tooling after we had cut and assembled the one that you're going to see at the end of this. So this will make the eyes a little bit thinner, and same with the mouth, so they won't be so proud of the face of this snowman. I think they'll look much better in the end. So it's just going to cut down 8 millimeters, going to pocket those out. It's going to be offset tooling with that 1/4 inch end mill, and I'm going to give it a little bit of an allowance. So these are actually going to be overshoot by 1 millimeter again, so that when I go in and do my cutout pass, then I'll actually have a nice clean edge. So that's why I did that with the negative allowance to make the hole bigger, and we can just go ahead and rename that and calculate it, and we'll preview that visible toolpath, and there we have those little pockets. The next thing we're going to look at is the fluting toolpath. I wanted some detail on the brim of the hat, so I thought it'd be fun if I could use the fluting toolpath. So with a VCarve bit and the fluting toolpath, I said, let's go down to, start at 0 and go down to 3 millimeters. We're going to use the ramp at start and end, so it's going to go down at the first and then come up to the center and across, which is quite nice. We're going to do a ramp percentage of 25%, so that leaves 50% at the highest point in the middle, which is kind of nice. And we are not going to worry about the vector selection. We're not going to project it onto a 3D model because there isn't any there. We'll just rename that and we'll calculate that up and we can preview that visible toolpath. And there we have these interesting little lines that are going to be on the brim of the hat. The next toolpath we're going to look at is going to be a chamfer toolpath. So this is a really basic thing. We're just going to start at 0. We're going to use the same VCarve bit I already have in the machine from the last toolpath. We're going to make sure that's a width of 4 millimeters, which seemed to be about right. We're going to go down a cut depth of 6.9. So when I put in the 4 millimeters, the software calculated that for me, the cut depth. I'm going to go inside my vector. Okay, I'm going to slope upwards, so I'm going to get this kind of shape. I'm going to use the vector selection order, and then we're going to go ahead and calculate. Now, why I chose that, I think it may have just been set on there by mistake, but it doesn't matter in the end. So we're just going to go with that. And we'll calculate that and we'll preview that visible toolpath, and you'll see we get that nice chamfered edge on those particular elements. So that's great. And then we're going to go ahead and do our cutout toolpath in the end. Very basic cutout toolpath. We're starting at 0. We're going to go down the thickness of our material plus a little bit extra. We're going to use that same end mill we've used before. It's going to take 6 cuts to do this. We're going to be outside those vector lines. We're going to add in some tabs, and I put a lot of tabs in there. You may choose to put less tabs. There may have been, I'd use 2 for each eye. I don't think I had to do that in the end. I could have just used 1. But anyway, they were safe and did stay in the machine, or in the material, excuse me. The thickness is 4 millimeters. I could have made them a little less thick, but I was a little unsure of whether or not they were going to hold. So I wanted to make sure they did stay in there. And we're going to go ahead and rename that, and we can calculate that. It's going to give me a warning. It's going to tell me I'm going to cut through my material. I already know that, so that's not a big deal. Let's just go ahead and calculate that, and we'll preview that visible toolpath. And there we have it. So let's go ahead now and have a look at that second file, which is the actual growth chart. So here's the second file. This is the actual growth chart file. Now you'll see here that we have the same notes as before. Please make sure you read and understand these, okay, before you actually move on. I'm just going to press OK here. Now let's take a look at the job setup to start with. It's sort of the same setup as before, nothing different here except for I'm using a much longer piece of material. This is a bit of a trick to set up on my machine, but once I had it set up nice and straight, then everything worked out really well. And all the other settings here are exactly the same as before. So I can just click OK. And it's going to warn me that I'm going to cut through my material. Again, I already know that, so let's not worry about that. I'm going to click OK. Let's have a look at our layers here. We've got some layers set up for you automatically. There's the bitmap layer. That's what was created when I imported in my bitmap to trace the snowman's head. We have the lines. That's the actual lines, the measurement lines on the growth chart. We have a text layer for obviously text. We have a profile vector for our cutout profile vector, and we have the snowman pockets. And these are all colored so you know what's going on. Now, one of the things I wanted to really make super customizable about this is the name and the saying. So again, you can put in a different child's name if you'd like to, maybe a family name if you want to use one of these boards for the whole family. And I put in here the year of Georgia, who I have no idea who that is, very fictional, her birthday, which I thought would be kind of nice to have in there. I added in some nice text here, chose the font that looked really good, and I think that's pretty nice in the end. So let's have a look at the tooling. So let's go ahead and bring up our tooling, and we'll tile our views, and we'll start off with our profile. And these are lines. So we're talking about the lines here on the side here, the lines that we're going to use for measurement. Those are just profile toolpaths. We're going to go down 3 millimeters. We're going to use a basic end mill. We're going to cut on the line. Okay, that's important because the way I set them up. Those lines were set up by using the actual array copy tool. So I knew they were exactly the right distance apart for the measurement that I needed, which was an inch between each line. I'm going to go on those lines like I had said, and we are going to go ahead and just rename our toolpath, and then we can go ahead and calculate that, and we'll preview that visible toolpath. And there we have it. It's not too fancy. So close that down, and then we're going to look at the snowman pocket. It's very basic. It's just a pocket toolpath. Again, we're going to go down that same 3 millimeters. I thought that was a good depth for these pockets. Using that end mill, We are going to do offset tooling, very basic, and we can just go ahead and calculate that and preview that visible toolpath. That looks great, and then we're going to close that one down and we'll take a look at the V-carving of our text. Now at this point, during the cutting, you can climb up on your CNC machine and make sure that that snowman fits in there, because if it doesn't quite fit in there, then you can go ahead and adjust your offset. Now again, I offsetted that pocket by 1 millimeter so that I was pretty sure it was going to fit in there no matter what. No fussing around. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and look at the V-carving here. Very basic. I'm putting a basic start depth for my V-carving. That way I'm going to get a nice, little bit deeper V-carving than what I normally would. I like that look in the end. I think it's kind of nice if I give it a little extra start. We're going to use a nice V-bit here, 60 degrees. Nothing fancy, and we're just going to go ahead and calculate that. It's going to tell me, do I want to actually look at the text and so on and validate that? I decided not to and see what happens, and everything worked out fine for me in the end. So we'll preview that visible toolpath, and there we have it. It looks really quite nice. We can close that down, and then the cutout. Now, if you remember from the original design image that I showed you earlier, I had the snowman kind of hugging the growth chart and kind of pulling in that edge. That's why it's kind of bent a little bit. In the end, I decided to leave out the mitten that the snowman had on, but I still liked that line. So I kept that line in on the side, on the right-hand side, and of course I added a little bit to the top to give it a little bit more character, and I think that really came off well. So in order to do that, I had to take all of my lines and my numbers, and I used the distort tool so I could sort of move those in and line them up with that curve that I had there. So let's just go ahead now to profile toolpath. Nothing fancy with that. We're going to cut outside the line. We are going to add in a bunch of tabs, and you'll see them here. I was a little bit paranoid because my board was just the right length, width, excuse me. So I wanted to make sure I had enough tabs to hold it in place, and that all worked out really good, and we can go ahead and calculate that. Again, I've told it to cut through just by a little bit, and we can click OK. Let's preview that toolpath, and there we have it. Now, a couple things you're going to notice is that there's some blank spaces at the end. I did that on purpose. I wanted a place to screw down my material to my wasteboard on my CNC, and I only went to 5 feet tall. I figured that after 5 feet tall, maybe you don't want to get measured anymore, or really in the end it was because I wanted to have room at the top to put some text. Okay? Anyway, let's go ahead now and see how this cut on the CNC machine and see how I finished it in the end. Went ahead and got that material secured to our wasteboard. Put in the end mill, and we started to pocket out the face of the snowman. It's the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. Took out that end mill and we put in our V-bit. That way we could go ahead and do our fluting toolpath on the brim of the hat. And we also used that same cutter to do the chamfer toolpath to give that extra little bit of dimension. It looks really sharp. Put back in the end mill, and we did our profile cut to go ahead and cut out all those different shapes. Now it was good that we went and cut the snowman ahead of time. That way I could cut out the head and I could dry fit that into the actual growth chart. And as you can see, that worked out really, really well. Swapped out that material and put down the full length piece for the growth chart and went ahead and did the actual measurements. You'll notice that I came in from the edge of the material, and in our actual file you'll see that those lines actually go outside of our material. That was done on purpose. And we pocketed out where the snowman's head was going to be and made sure that snowman fit in there by sanding off all of those tabs and then dry fitting it in. Look at that, it works perfect. So now we can go ahead and finish the rest of the growth chart. Went in and did our V-carving. This took the longest, but it was well worth the wait. This of course is all customizable stuff that you can change for pretty much whatever you'd like. At the very top, of course, we had Georgia and the year 2020 on there. But you again could change that to be a family name or just another quote or comment. It looks really good. I'll put back in that end mill again, and we're going to do our profile cut and cut
around the outside of our growth chart. Once that was all done, we took it off the wasteboard and then we had to cut it out, just remove those tabs. Went ahead and did a little more sanding on all the bits to make up the snowman's head. Got rid of all those fuzzy edges and then fitted that up to make sure it all fit. And that looks cool. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I decided to paint all these parts, and I could be a little bit messy with this because I was overshooting all of the bits. Decided to put a nice dark stain on the actual growth chart. Had to paint it into the actual letters and numbers first of all, and then just wipe that off. And I have to say, it came to life when I put this stain on there. It looked really, really good. Just went ahead and glued in the snowman's head, and there we have it.
I hope you enjoyed that. I had a lot of fun making it. You know, there's not many things I would change about this. If you'd like to head over to your V&Co account, you can download this project yourself and customize it for your own family or friends. If you like that video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any comments or suggestions or questions, please leave them below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Anyway, I hope that you're all having fun, you're making great stuff, and most of all, from us here at Vectric, I hope you're all keeping safe. Until next time, see you later.